Welcome, everybody, to the Futurum Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Newman, Principal Analyst and Founding Partner at Futurum Research. Excited for today's Futurum Tech Podcast interview series, where we're going to be talking to Tien Tzuo, the CEO of Zuora. Today's show is going to focus on the subscription economy, consumption, SaaS, and all the things that are going on in the marketplace that involve people subscribing and building better business practices around that behavior. We're going to be talking about the access economy, where people are less likely to buy and more likely to subscribe. And we know this. We talk about this, whether it's the Ubers we take, the cloud software that we're going to use in our business. We love consuming everything. We would buy our food on subscription if we could. Oh yeah, we can. We do every single day. Anyhow, excited about this show, and I'm going to have Tien join us in just a moment. Before I do, as always, quick disclaimer, this show is for information and entertainment purposes only, and while we might be talking about or to publicly traded companies, please do not take anything we say as investment advice. At the end of the show, I'm going to give you a little bit more information, some links, some places to learn more about Tien and what's going on at Zuora, but without further ado, I'm going to have him join me here on the show. Tien,
Dan,
Futurum Tech Podcast interview series. Excited to have you here.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
So I got you all warmed up, right? You were glowing hearing me talk subscription economy, consumption.
I'm excited.
You have any of your food delivered yet?
Oh, of course. I don't think I left my house in a year. Everything's delivered now. I reach for my phone for just about anything.
I love it. I love it. I think sometimes people don't even realize what subscriber fiends we've become. I think a lot of us think of it in a few aspects, maybe your Netflix subscription, or maybe you think about it with your phone. But right now, as an economy, we're kind of willing to subscribe to anything and everything that gives us that convenience. I know my meals, I get a factor 75. I get my meals delivered every week now.
That's right.
I open the box, I throw them in the microwave. I get my subscribe and save with all my favorite staples. It's been crazy how much we've just shifted our whole life, and obviously COVID. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, fitness, health, work, right, entertainment, you name it, you can subscribe to it. That's the new world.
It is. It's great though. It's very exciting, and I'm really excited to hear more about what you're doing. So let's start there. I want to just give me a quick introduction of yourself and your role at Zuora.
Sure. Well, I founded Zuora and continue to run the company as a CEO. But I started about 13 years ago. And, we're a software company. We power a lot of the companies, the business of a lot of these companies that are behind these fantastic services. And so HBO, Ford, and a lot of business to business, right? Industrial solutions like Caterpillar, a lot of the software, the service companies like Zoom and Box. And so maybe the best way to understand this is, it's 2007. And this is before the global financial crisis, right? I'm at Salesforce. My co-founders were at a company called WebEx. And what we had seen, and it was still early, but we could see that it was simply inevitable that this was going to happen, that software was being transformed. And when we started our respective companies, back in like 1999, software was sold as a CD. Right? It was under a product sale where I would sell it to you and you would have to figure out what to do with it, right? You'd have to install it, run it on the databases, back it up, maintain it, and it was down. You have to call your IT department. And we said, look, there's this thing called the internet. And what if we did away with all that stuff, right? What if we just use the internet? Well, we'll manage it. We'll manage it and you simply use it as a service, right? When you want to make a phone call, you don't worry about like switches or towers or satellites. You just pick up your phone and you're using the service and you only pay based on how many gigabytes you consume, how many phone calls you made. And we said software should really be like this. And so fast forward to 2007, we thought the entire software sector was going to go this route. And we said to ourselves, is this just a software thing? Or could it happen to anything? And we looked at a company called Netflix, which at the time was, his fame was they were putting Blockbuster out of business by mailing you DVDs where you didn't have to walk to the store. But more importantly, for $20 a month, you can get access to any movie like ever made. And that was much better than saying buying, whatever it was, $30 just for like one movie. All right. And this is before streaming, back then, the internet wasn't even as popular as it is today. The iPhone had just come out. There was no app store, right? So this was fairly early on. We looked at a company called Zipcar. And there's about 1 million people around the world that said, I don't need to buy a car anymore. I'll just get a zip card membership. I'll walk up to one of their cars, swipe it, and I'll just drive it away, and I just pay based on how many hours or how many miles I drove. And so he said, this whole thing about subscribing to stuff, what if it wasn't just software? What if it's happened to everything, every single industry? And we said, let's see. We think it's going to happen. And if that happens, there's going to be a new set of tools that are required to run these businesses. It can't be SAP, it can't be Oracle, it can't be the traditional things. And that's what we set out to do. We've been doing it for 13 years. And today we power some of the best brands in the world. And you and I are finding ourselves truly living in a subscription economy.
Yeah, I remember the first time I read a book called Consumption Economics, and it sort of, my head kind of blew up the first time I read it. And, we'd all been talking about it in different aspects of our lives, but just starting to think about the way everybody purchases everything.
Yeah.
We're seeing it endlessly in areas like support from big tech companies. You remember companies that would sell you a box. Here's your network switch. Do you want to buy some support with it? And, the first thing now, the question is, do you even want to buy the box? I mean, no, I just want to use it, And cable got that right fairly early on. Like, you just pay us a fee every month. We'll own the equipment. We'll handle the books. We'll manage the assets and the depreciation, and we'll upgrade you as you go, and we'll keep upping the charges. And it's a really beautiful business model. But I love the story. And by the way, every moment you kind of took me back in time. It just made me remember the first time I had an iPhone. I didn't actually have an app store, and now it's so like just part of our life. Like, you need something, you go find an app. But there was a time when we had an iPhone and we didn't have an app store, which actually I wanted to ask you, because I was going to ask you about the inspiration of the company, but you sort of laid that out there. But I do want to know, because with the group you have, so WebEx, something I've used a long time, and we all know the story of Salesforce pretty well. Well, not all, but most of my tech community would say they do. We love software. Mark and the team, and you were number 11, I believe, employee 11. Pretty cool. So was there a moment of inspiration, though, for you and your partners that you said, this is where we're going to go? We're going to start a business to basically make consumption and subscription to power this?
Well, it was actually a meeting. So my co-founder was with one of the founders of WebEx. And the founder of WebEx came over and wanted to talk to Mark Benioff, right, CEO, founder of Salesforce, about some idea. And so I think my desk was outside of Mark's office. Mark came and said, hey, when you want to join the meeting? I said, sure. And so KB, my co-founder, was there. And we found, instead of talking about, and I don't even remember what the subject was, right? It was another startup idea. We spent about 40 minutes basically kvetching about our billing systems. Right. And we just felt like these systems were holding us back. There's all these things that we wanted to do with subscription business models. We wanted to go international. We wanted to do consumption-based billing. Right. We can see all this growth that we can have, but our systems were the internal homegrown systems just wouldn't let us do it. And so KB said, look, if two of the biggest at the time SaaS companies in the world are having the same problem, there must be an opportunity. And that's where I said, hey, KB, look, I could totally see how the software sector is going to need this. And, it's a pretty big sector. But what if all companies need it? And now we're talking about something that's a really, really big idea. And so we set out to do it. I think the first few years, right, it was definitely other software as a service companies that we worked with. But then we started seeing it happen. And I'll tell you, a few years ago, when we started seeing manufacturing companies really starting to call us and saying, look, we need some help. And at first we were like, well, why would the manufacturing company need us, right? It's a physical product. And some of these companies like Caterpillar, really, they're selling gigantic, expensive, right, heavy physical equipment. And are they trying to rent, right, letting people rent these excavators and such? And it wasn't. It was really this thing called the Internet of Things. And what we find now is you could buy a washing machine, you could buy a car, you could buy $1 million medical scanner. Let's say you're a hospital, and every one of these things is now collecting all this information and connected to the internet. Right? If you put in a water boiler today, you could probably pick up your phone and actually check how hot it is. Right? If you buy a vacuum cleaner, you can see what's going on. If you buy a Sub-Zero fridge, it's connected to the internet. And so these companies are going through the same exact revolution that software companies are going through. The same reason that drove software companies to say we need to offer this as a service these hardware companies are doing the same thing. And so when you think about it that way, when you think about the whole physical world is about to go digital, right? Physical plus digital, you can see how big this idea is. And we truly believe, and I'll call it the end of ownership, this idea that we don't really have to own things anymore, right? I know it sounds strange because we grew up owning things, but you don't have to, right? Why own things, and why deal with the hassle and the burden of ownership if you can get what you need simply from a service that you subscribe to?
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little more about that here. And we've actually been sort of changing ourselves over the years unknowingly. You mentioned the Netflix transformation. Well, for years, we weren't buying movies. We were renting them. We were sort of, these habits were being created in little pockets of our lives. We started leasing vehicles because we wanted new vehicles all the
That's
time.
right.
We didn't want to deal with maintenance
Those
and
are the early
ownership.
signs.
We were renting, and you can use a different term, but even the upcoming generation of millennials, a lot of them aren't buying real estate, which I could make a number of arguments from a net worth wealth standpoint of why they maybe should think differently, but it's all in the experience economy. It's the dollar. What dollar gets me the furthest? Owning is more dollars. I'm paying principal. Let me just pay the rent. I'll take those principal dollars. I'll use them for other things. Maybe I'll go on Robinhood and I'll buy some stonks and I'll try to get really rich real quick. I don't know what you're doing, but the point is, people have slowly over ages become a little bit of these access economy figures without even necessarily knowing it. We've been sort of training and breeding this for a long, long time. So quickly, you had earnings last week. You're talking about a market that's growing fast. Zuora is a publicly traded company, clearly gaining some momentum. You wouldn't be around still if you didn't. You wouldn't have probably had the opportunity to go public. But how is all this momentum that we've been talking about translating for your business and your growth?
Well, I'll tell you, we had a great quarter, and we exceeded all our target metrics, and this is a few quarters in a row that we've done that. But I would say the big picture for us, when you look at what happened in the quarter, is something happened in 2020, and we kind of all know this, right? We kind of all know that somehow we entered a new world, and you hear the stats out there. Digital acceleration, what used to take 7 years, right, to do, now it takes 7 months to do. Companies have to really, really start to move fast. And I would say this, we started the show talking about how we're all at home now, accessing services. And so if you're a company that depends on physical infrastructure, people to come to your restaurant, come to your stores, and you don't have a digital relationship with your customers, you found it really hard to move. Right? I was reading an article about how Starbucks, or people can't go to the stores, but because they had the Starbucks app and they already had the infrastructure to have a digital relationship with their customers, they actually did okay through this pandemic. And so I think all companies are waking up to a few things. One is that they have to know who their customers are. They have to have a digital relationship. And two, there's something about the power of recurring revenue. And the way I like to tell the story is, right, let's pick your sport. Let's say we're playing American football. Right. And if you have a product, those companies that have a traditional transactional revenue model, right? They sell movie tickets, they sell cars, they sell laptops. Every quarter, in order to make their number, they're starting way back at their 20-yard line. But if you have a recurring revenue model like Netflix or like Spotify or Salesforce, what you do is you start like yards away from the end zone. Right. And because you have that power of predictable recurring revenue, the loyalty of your customers translates into predictability. And so you're able to surge. And so what we found, our statistics showed, we do this report we call the Subscription Economy Index. We've done it for a long time. And our report showed that over half the companies that we track, subscription businesses, really didn't get impacted by the pandemic. There's a whole set of them that surged. There are companies like Zoom, right? Companies like Fender that said, we have a digital experience and our customers really need what we do during this time. But even the companies on the other side that were affected, they were affected moderately at best, right? They didn't see the 50, 60, 70% drop in revenues. There's a resiliency to the model. So companies are saying, gosh, our customers' preferences are changing. If I don't change with them, somebody's going to come in and I'm going to get Ubered, if you will. Right. At the same time, there's all this growth that I can have in the stability of the recurring revenue. So companies are starting to accelerate their shift, their investment in digital relationships, digital transformation. And they're moving as fast as they can to this new business model.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to get Ubered, Netflix. I wrote a book all about this called Future Proof, and we spent a lot of time focusing on that exact topic. And I always would, I do a keynote, and we'd always start off talking about the there was never like a last day that the taxi stand woke up and realized that their business was coming to an end. I mean, it's not over, but like you said, their business model versus Uber's, anybody in their right mind would rather even order their taxi or black car through Uber as opposed to get it the traditional way. No one wants to go out in the street and hail a cab or go to the taxi stand and get shipped down. You want the convenience, the app economy. So you have the app economy, subscription economy. You want your credit cards tied to things. You want your small incremental charges to just hit your account. You don't want to whip out your cash. Who wants to carry cash? I mean, maybe Bitcoins, you want to whip them out and pay people with them.
No, the Bitcoin.
Everybody out there that can't see me, I'm joking. But it's actually great that you went down that path, by the way, Tien, because I was going to ask you about COVID. You kind of jumped ahead of me. I think you're kind of thinking for me, and you're getting questions almost before I even asked them to you. I was going to mention to you, COVID-19 had to be a massive accelerator. I even had interesting companies. I talked about Oracle recently. 74% of their business was recurring revenue. So when you look at companies that even you would think were more CapEx, they've massively overhauled their businesses over the last decade or so to create more subscription. And if you actually look at the tech, kind of the left to right of the whole tech industry, the big OEMs and legacy tech companies that were heavily CapEx have struggled the most to have strong quarters, return to growth, because they were so dependent upon these sort of one-time large implementation.
It's that football analogy, right? They've got to traverse the whole field where you're at the finish line.
Yeah, and so these companies that had 60, 70, 80% recurring, and you made a really important point. This isn't only companies that are in software and tech. These are companies, even in media, that have huge subscription or recurring revenues. I mean, even like the Facebooks of the world have advertisers with very predictable revenue models.
Well,
that they
Disney Plus
every single month. Other than maybe the government that can have a known amount of revenue and can't figure out how to manage the business. Any company that does have a guaranteed recurring base can really be strategic. It gives them a jet powered fueling to go forward, because you say, okay, I can predict 73%, 85%, 61% of my revenue will be here this year. Your attrition rates, your net dollar growth rates, and where you're going to get new subscription. That stuff you can plan really, really successfully. I want to touch on, since you kind of hit me on the COVID stuff, I was going to talk to you about, but you already did a great job. Let's talk about access and ownership just a little bit more. In the wake of COVID, it seems logical to me that access is only going to become a bigger theme, that we're only going to want more flexibility. We're not going to want to tie ourselves down more. And I'm guessing, at least for the short period of all this mobility and time that's been lost, people are going to be even less interested in sort of these big CapEx and more interested in finding flexible, accessible consumption stuff, whether that's product, services, or software. Do you think this model, this COVID acceleration in your world, is going to be a multi-year accelerator?
Oh, absolutely. You can already feel it today. I mean, I'll tell you, before COVID, I looked at the whole Marie Kondo trend, right? I don't know if you've been tracking that, right? Where just throw it all away. Just go to your closet and throw it all away. And at first I thought it was just fad. It's like, well, what's going on there? Is it just some kind of fad? But it really is this whole idea of an end of ownership. I think people are waking up when everything's going digital. You don't need to own these things anymore. Maybe you got all these phones in your drawer, right? And they're all just obsolete. And so why would you want that? And so I think we are really seeing the end of ownership, because if you can access what you need, right, in a service that somebody else takes care of, then why would you want to own it, right? Because you have the flexibility, you have the ability to dial it up, dial it down, switch the type of cars, right? You always get the latest technologies. It's the worst feeling in the world when you buy something and then 6 months later it's obsolete, right? If you step into a car now that has not been updated like the Teslas are in the last 3 to 4 years, you feel like you're in an ancient piece of technology. And so things are moving so fast that it doesn't make any sense to own things anymore. And so you're just going to continue to see the decline of ownership. And when I look at it that way, when you talk about access, some people think that, that this whole idea of subscriptions is just to let people pay over time, right? Like you talked about the first generation leases and whatnot. The best subscription economy companies are not just doing that. They're actually understanding what their customers are actually doing. And that's the magic is if you can understand, the customer is really just trying to learn to be a musician, right? They want to be a musician. They didn't buy a guitar to own a guitar. They bought a guitar to be a musician. They bought a washing machine because they want clean clothes. They bought a car because they need to commute every day to get from point A to point B. Right? They bought some software because they want to be productive at work. And if you can actually understand what it is that they're truly doing, and then using digital technologies to see what they're doing and actually create a better service, of course people are going to flock to it. That was our big insight at Salesforce. It's 1999. We pushed the software out, right? And so this is like the dark ages of the internet. We didn't even have Wi-Fi. Most people didn't have Wi-Fi at home, right? And you didn't have Wi-Fi in hotels because the first generation of customers, of users that we had at Salesforce were, traveling salespeople. They would unplug the phone cord in their phone, plug it into your laptop. You would hear the dial-up modem, right? And that's how our customers used our software back then. And so it's really early. We pushed the first release of Salesforce out. And then we realized, we can actually see how our customers are using our product, right? What percent logged in, what percent created a contact, what percent ran a report. And this is mind blowing because as people that used to ship software, you would never know how your customers are using your software. And so we realized at that point, we can use data to actually deliver what the customer truly bought the software for, right? Or used the software for. And so that's how we moved to more of a usership model in our mindset. So now you imagine car engineers, right? Washing machine designers, right? People creating medical scanners. Like, why aren't you doing the scan? Why are you putting too much soap in the washing machine, right? That's how you really drive my car. You're driving a lot faster than I thought you did, or a lot slower. How come you're not changing the clock, right? It's daylight savings time. Well, I just don't know how to do it. Well, we should just do it for you. And so this whole revolution that you've seen in software is just so much better now than it was 15 years ago, or 20 years ago. You're going to see the same thing happen in the physical world. And these products are going to become smarter. They're going to know who you are, and you simply access them to get what you want. This is the way the world is going.
Well, is it fair if I just say I want them to draw the line on intelligent vehicles? I like going fast. I'm a combustion engine. I like to hear that thing roar. And I do not want my insurance company to know how I drive my cars. But all joking aside, I realize that is the world we're going towards. The computer knows everything. I mean, we're going to hear about Tiger Woods. We're going to know everything about that accident and what happened without ever having to do any sort of real physical investigation, because that computer is going to tell when they actually release that. That's how intelligent these machines have become. Yeah. And I mean, that was a horrible, unfortunate circumstance. But the point is the computers now really do know. So whether you see those new commercials from, I think it's Progressive, where the guy's sitting in the car driving around evaluating her, and then she finds out there's an app. And all she had to do was have that app on her phone, and the phone could have tracked her. I mean, it's amazing. It's not even in the car. It's the little tiny pocket computer that we're carrying around, has the full compute network, storage, and connectivity capabilities to monitor behavior, track, provide analytics, and they can price your insurance by just simply being in the car with you, which everybody has their phone. I might forget my wallet. I might forget my bag on the way to the airport, but I won't forget my phone. I'll never forget my phone. And so,
yeah, it might sound weird, but it's fair, right? It's like how much you pay for insurance, should be dependent on how well you drive or how much you drive.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm being funny. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you have a fun car. I mean, how are you going to sell Teslas with ludicrous mode when they're going to know immediately that you went 0 to 60 in 1.5 seconds and you're blown to 100 in 3? Well, you've already broken pretty much every law and committed at least one misdemeanor. Should they continue to insure you? It makes me think of like Total Recall, when you'd start speeding and the ticket would just come right out the dash. You get the speeding. You remember that movie? Or I
think it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. I think smart people will find ways to still have some fun. So.
I'm sure they will. So listen, I've only got a couple minutes left. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks a lot, Tien, for being here, for representing Zuora. Really interesting to hear all about the company, where it's heading. Speaking of where it's heading, what are the next waves of technology that you're going to implement? I mean, I'm reading a little bit, but I'm going to force that. I have to imagine AI and ML is high on your list as a way to further optimize. Because a lot of the things we even just talked about are sort of enhanced by
Yeah.
some sort of advanced analytics, advanced machine learning algorithms.
Yeah.
People mistake AI a lot of times for other things than what it actually is. But I have to imagine that all that stuff, you're all over it.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I appreciate you asking the question. We got some product announcements that we're pretty excited about. But just to put some context, we wrote this book, and I actually have a copy of it right here. You mentioned a couple of books. We wrote this book called Subscribed a few years ago, and it documented where we saw the world was going. And the first half of the book talked about different industries in transformation. And the second half of the book, it talked about inside of a department, the marketing department, the engineering department, the sales department. Here's how things are changing. And here's the new rules, right? You have to always think of beta products, always be in beta, if you will. And so we got tons. This book has sold close to 200,000 copies of companies coming to us and saying, we want you to go deeper, right? These concepts are really, really good, but help us figure out how to build these subscription businesses. So over the last few years, we've been mining our data, right? We anonymize it. We use it to publish a subscription economy index. We use it to create best practices and benchmarks. And so we started seeing, okay, there's a lot of things about this data that's really, really unique for us. And of course, the natural next step, given where technology is, that we're starting to do is how do we apply machine learning to that data to actually, like you said, ultimately it's about creating better outcomes for the customer. So it turns out one big area is payments, right? Payments in the subscription economy is big and complex. When you order something from Amazon and they need to ship it, they'll hit your credit card, and if it works, they ship the product. Well, if it's a subscription service, every month they've got to go figure out how to collect that, right? Either through a PO or a wire transfer or credit card, direct debit. And so it turns out that upwards of 5, 7, 10% of payments fail every single month for a company. And if you can figure that out, we can generate millions and millions of dollars more for the customer, for our companies. And so we have a new product that we're launching called Collect AI that's going to take machine learning and actually understand your collections process, make recommendations of when to charge a credit card, how much to retry it, right? When to basically suspend the service and just create a much, much better experience, both for the company and the customers.
Yeah, that's a great concept there. And of course, there's the two sides of it. Naturally, the benefit to the subscription company of optimizing and getting paid. I mean, that's the key, that flow of cash consistently coming in. But there's a very human element to that too. It's being sensitive to people's abilities to continue to pay, especially in this economy where people are subscribed to 20 and 30 services now. And there's been quite a sprawl. And again, for the economy itself, it's great. It's great to help all these companies grow. For a lot of individuals, they subscribe to things and it goes back to the old gym subscription, right? To where you'd subscribe, you'd go for 3 months and then you get bored and you stop going, but you forget to cancel. So they charge. Well, now we have like 20 of those. A lot of us are getting, I'm pretty sure I still have a Adobe subscription for a bunch of tools that I wanted to toy with on a weekend. I never unsubscribed. And I'm pretty sure every month, but I'm saying a lot of people have that. So, you're seeing technologies to manage that, and your technology is helping people pay when it's most within their capabilities to do so. So that's super interesting. Tien, I would love to talk to you. I could talk to you longer. Typically, the show only runs 20, 22 minutes. And we've talked for 28. Beauty of having my own show is I get to make the decision of when I stop. And
that's great.
So I was happy to keep going because you were interesting and I was really enjoying the conversation. But at this point, I want to just say, thanks for joining me. Thanks for sharing the story, the backdrop. It's great to get Zuora on the radar. I hope everybody out there listening has made a note, paying attention, especially if this business is something that you're in. It sounds like it's going to be a name we're going to either need to know now or you're going to need to know a lot more in the future. But for now, I'm going to say goodbye to you, Tien, but let's have you back.
Thanks, Dan. It was fun. It's great to be here.
All right. Thanks for joining me. All right, everybody. There you have it. Tien from the CEO of Zuora. What an interesting conversation it was. Great backstory. Number 11 employee at Salesforce. So clearly early on and got the subscription economy early, built this company who's growing at a breakneck speed in an economy that continues to grow. And as the demand for subscriptions goes up, Zuora is going to be clearly a beneficiary. For more on the study that Tien talked about, I'm going to put that in the show notes. For more on the company, I'll also put some more information on the company in the show notes as well. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to have you here. lots more podcasts, executive conversations like these, as well as internal and analysis with the team at Futurum Research. For this episode, though, it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you later.